the topic scleroderma today. Just a minute. Okay. Yes. The systemic sclerosis is a rare, heterogeneous, slow motion with a. Okay, we'll skip this. Yes. Yeah, it's derived from the Greek word means hard skin. It affects mainly the women in the prime of their life. So the men is to female ratio is 3:1 or 5:1. As I was saying, most of the diseases, the autoimmune diseases, are seen in females rather than males, bearing few like ankylosing spondylitis. The onset is mostly in the third to fifth decade, that is 30 to 50 years. So, what could be the cause? This is a hypothesis. There is no definitive cause and all those, but the immunological reasons could be one and ischemic reasons. So, what is the primary immunological reasons that could lead to immune response and the cytokine production and very excessive growth factor production. So, when there is more production of the growth factors, you will see more and more, and then it leads to fibrosis ultimately. Or there could be an ischemia due to some cell injury, so that leads to endothelial cell injury with vascular compromise. So this leads to cell death or cell injury. So then there will be a repair of that as a response from the body. So the chronic repair will lead to again the fibrosis. So you can see either genetic susceptibility or external stimulus. This leads to immune activation and immune mediated release or external stimulus, and all these leading to fibroblast proliferation. So this leads to collagen synthesis and thickening, fibrosis, and the end organ damage. So it's a multi-system disorder characterized by functional and structural abnormalities of blood vessels, fibrosis of skin and internal organs, immune system activation due to autoimmunity. And there is localized scleroderma, that is morphea and linear scleroderma. So here you can see the scleroderma. It's a localized scleroderma in which you will be seeing morphea and linear scleroderma. The morphea we will discuss next. And the systemic sclerosis or systemic scleroderma, which is called limited or diffuse or systemic sclerosis, sign scleroderma. So the systemic is either limited or diffuse, and whereas the localized is linear or morphea. So localized forms here you can see morphea or the generalized form or linear scleroderma. So what is a morphea? So morphea is a rare skin condition that causes reddish or purplish patches on your skin, and that tends to affect mostly the outer layers of the skin, that is the dermis, the fatty tissue just beneath the epidermis. The location is mostly commonly in the abdomen, chest, and the back, or the face, arms, and the legs. So, how are the signs? It would be hard and thickening of the skin, and the discoloration leading to lighter or darker than the surrounding area. And there will be oval patches that may change colors and gradually develop a whitish center. Or there could be linear patches, especially on the arms and legs. And there will be loss of hair and the sweat glands in the affected area over time. Here you can see the patches here, and this affecting the chest area. Here the hypopigmented patches, second, and you can see the normal skin here, and here the hypopigmented patches. So discoloration of the affected skin to look lighter or darker, or the oval shaped patches. Here you can see oval shaped patches, and the linear patch and loss of hair and sweat glands. The loss of hair and sweat glands, but here you can see the linear, the oval shaped patches and the discoloration of the skin. Yeah, this is the generalized thing. Yeah, so this is the linear variety. As we were discussing, the linear varieties, see, it could be straight patches with hypopigmented, and here you can see the loss of hair and the glands. So the oval shaped patches, the linear shaped variety, and the loss of the hair and sweat glands. So the linear shaped scleroderma in children with induration you can see, and fibrosis. They often this here you can see the discoloration and band-like thing, the linear, the straight line, and it's unilateral. So the epidemiology is the susceptibility age. It's mostly between 30 to 50K, and as we were speaking, female to male ratio, and so the pathogenesis, how do you want to see? So it could be vasculopathy of small artery and capillary vessels, that is the endothelial cell injury, leading to adhesion and activation of platelets, thromboxane and platelet deriving growth factor release, vasoconstriction and growth of endothelial cell and fibroblast, and this leading to narrowing or increased permeability. Or the fibrosis due to aberrant regulation of the fibroblast cell growth, increased production of extracellular matrix, as we are discussing, collagen and glycosaminoglycan. This leads to thickening of the skin and fibrosis of internal organs. So, an ischemic injury or fibrosis due to the production of fibroblasts and ultimately thickening of the skin and fibrosis of the internal organs. So, immunological mechanism. So, there could be a cell-mediated immunity or humoral immunity. In the cell-mediated immunity, you'll see the cellular infiltrates like T cell, Langerhans cells, and plasma cells and macrophages in the perivascular region and the dermis. Whereas in the humoral immunity, you will be seeing hypergamoglobinemia and antibody production, leading to anti-nuclear antibody being positive. What are the environmental factors that could be causing? That could be silica dust, organic solvents, biogenic urea, bleomycin, and also could be a silicone implant. So you can see the platelets leading to production of thromboxane A2, or it could leads to defective vasculogenesis and thrombosis. This could be secondary to vascular injury, and this also leads to vascular injury. And ultimately, what happens is it leads to inflammation and autoimmunity, leading to fibrosis due to the production of collagen type 1 and platelet deriving growth factor. You can see the platelets leading to vascular injury, and the vascular injury again leading to platelets production. This leads to fibrosis. So ultimately, the production of type 1 collagen, platelet deriving growth factors leading to fibrosis of the skin and the thickening. So the classification of the systemic sclerosis. So it could be diffuse cutaneous systemic sclerosis or limited sclerosis. So diffuse cutaneous systemic sclerosis, in this you will be seeing proximal skin thickening, distal and proximal extremity, and often the trunk and the face, that is, and the tendency to rapid progression of skin change and the rapid onset of disease following Raynaud's phenomenon and early appearance of visceral involvement, and it has a very poor prognosis. So the systemic sclerosis, you will be seeing very early appearance of the organ involvement and the very rapid progression, and it could be more due to the Raynaud's phenomenon and is a very poor prognosis. Whereas the limited cutaneous systemic sclerosis, there could be a symmetric restricted fibrosis affecting distal extremities and face and neck. Here you can see the proximal skin thickening is seen in diffuse cutaneous, the systemic sclerosis, whereas in the limited cutaneous systemic sclerosis, you will be seeing the distal extremities and the face and neck being involved, and prolonged delay in appearance of distinct internal manifestations, and very good prognosis, and the prominence of calcinosis and telangiectasia. We'll be discussing this thing, the calcinosis, telangiectasia, and Raynaud's phenomenon. The main differences here you can say between the limited and systemic are the, the limited and diffuse are that proximal is more in this thing, the diffuse, whereas the distal involvement is more in the limited. Here you can see the crest syndrome, calcinosis, it's due to the calcium deposits in the skin. The Raynaud phenomena, it's a spasm of blood vessels in response to cold or stress. Whenever the patient is washing his hands or exposed to cold water or washing utensils, they will be complaining of sudden pain and numbness in the hands and the bluish discoloration of the hands. That is Raynaud's phenomenon. And then there is esophageal dysfunction. This leads to acid reflux and decrease in the motility of the esophagus. Sorry. And sclerodactyly, the thickening and tightening of the skin and the fingers and the hands. and telangiectasias, that is dilatation of the capillaries causing red marks on the surface of the skin. So I'll repeat it again. The CREST syndrome, that is C for calcinosis, that is calcium deposits in the skin, whereas the Raynaud's phenomenon, it's spasm of blood vessels in response to cold or stress, and esophageal dysfunction, that is acid reflux and decrease in motility of the esophagus, and there is sclerodactyly, that is thickening and tightening of the skin on the fingers and hands, and telangiectasias, that is dilatation of capillaries causing red marks on surface of the skin. Here you can see the limited cutaneous uh, and the diffuse cutaneous systemic sclerosis involved. So if you want to differentiate on the involvement by Raynaud's phenomena, skin involvement, musculoskeletal involvement, gastrointestinal involvement, you can see everything is involved in the diffuse scleroderma, whereas the renal involvement is very rare in limited scleroderma. So these are the two things you can remember. There is involvement of skin, musculoskeletal, gastrointestinal, the cardiopulmonary, and the renal in diffuse, whereas there could be a rare involvement of renal in the limited scleroderma. Whereas something called we discussed previously, scleroderma, sign scleroderma, the other type. The Raynaud's phenomenon is possible, but it's not most common. But whereas the skin involvement and musculoskeletal involvement is not seen, and the involvement of the organs, that is gastrointestinal, cardiopulmonary, renal, is very much seen. And the pre-scleroderma is a condition where only Raynaud's phenomena will be seen. But the important here is that limited scleroderma you will not be seeing renal most commonly, whereas in the diffuse you will be seeing everything. In the limited versus diffuse scleroderma, the differences, as we were discussing previously, it's the same. The distal skin involvement is more, whereas the proximal is more involved in diffuse scleroderma. And the Raynaud's phenomenon occurs years prior in the diffuse, whereas the Raynaud's phenomena occurs at the same time that of the skin changes present. So this is a very important point. The Raynaud's phenomena occurring very much prior to the skin changes is seen in limited, whereas the Raynaud's phenomenon and the skin changes almost occur at the same time can be seen in the diffuse. And usually there are no tendon friction rubs in the limited, whereas in the diffuse you can see that. And ANA is positive in both of them, and anti-nuclear, anti-centromere antibodies are present in the limited, whereas the nuclear or speckled patterns are seen in the diffuse. And as we were discussing, the renal involvement is very rare in the limited part, and the lung involvement is less common and more mild usually. So in the limited, you can be seeing the systemic involvement, that is organ involvement, is very much less, whereas compared to diffuse. And in the diffuse, you can see the renal crisis with RNA polymerase, and this is very high mortality. And in this, pulmonary arterial hypertension is seen in older age at onset and long-standing diseases, but the pulmonary artery hypertension may develop at any stage in the diffuse. So the important points here is one, the involvement of the skin, which is distal in limited, and the proximal in diffuse. That is most common. It may involve the face and neck and other areas, but the most common is distal involvement in limited, whereas the proximal in the diffuse. And the Raynaud phenomena occurring years prior to the involvement of the skin is seen in limited, and whereas the Raynaud's phenomenon occurring at the same time as that one is seen in the diffuse. So it's the same thing that we were seeing previously, the localized scleroderma and the cyst. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So here it is, the localized and the systemic sclerosis. In the systemic, we have limited and diffuse, and the localized, the morphea and the linear. This is just a summary of that all those. With being the esophageal dysmotility, Raynaud's phenomenon, telangiectasia, sclerodactyly, and calcinosis. So it's the same what we were discussing previously. So the clinical features, vascular abnormalities, Raynaud's phenomenon, cold hands and feet with reversible skin color changes, that is white to blue or red. So it is like whenever they are exposed to the cold water or something very cold, the skin color changes to red, the blue. And again, upon exposed to heat and all, normal skin color can be seen. And it is here you can see induced by cold temperature or emotional stress. And this is the initial complaint of 75% of the patients. So 90% of the patients have with skin changes. So it's when they are exposed to cold temperature and emotional stress, you could be seeing the skin changes, and it's a reversible. And there will be digital ischemic injury. Here you can see the Raynaud's phenomenon. See here, completely pale. Here it's becoming, and here you can see the bluish discoloration or the reddish discoloration when you being it's normal here. And these are the telangiectasias which we were discussing previously. See here on the lips, on the hands. And this is the terminal digit resorption. We'll come back to this. Yeah, this is skin involvement. In the skin involvement, you could be seeing the stages. There is an edematous phase, indurative phase, and atrophic phase. And you can be seeing firm, thick bound to the underlying soft tissue and decrease in the range of motion and loss of facial expression with inability to open the mouth fully. Here you can see the skin thickening. I think this would be more. See here you can see the skin thickening here in this one. Though it's for the terminal digit resorption, but you can see here the skin being thickened here so much with fibrosis. So first you will be seeing an edematous phase, then an indurative phase and atrophic phase with thickened to the underlying soft tissue and decrease in the range of motion and loss of facial expression and inability to open the mouth fully. So the skin thickening is more on the fingers and hands in nearly in all cases. The skin appears shiny and taut and may be erythematous at early stages. You can see here the shiny effect of the skin. See the edematous phase where it's fluffy and you can being swollen, and this is basically due to the water in the tissues. The binding of water to the increased extracellular connective tissue matrix leads to the edema, and the inflammation and poor lymphatic returns will also lead to the swelling and the microvascular injury with fluid extravasation. So when there is an injury, the vascular injury, there will be the extravasation of the fluid leading to edema and the poor lymphatic return and the inflammation. And next, the indurative phase. Here you can see the induration, the skin indurations. See the thick, shiny, taut skin with the adhering to the underlying tissue, so cannot be easily picked up. If you normally see the skin, it is pinchable, you can be picked it up, but here it adheres to the underlying tissue, which cannot be easily picked up, and the creases disappear and may become hyper or hypopigmented with hair loss and decreased sweat. And as we were speaking previously, there will be hair loss and loss of sweat glands. So there could be hair loss, decreased sweating, and very thickened. See the contractures being formed. This is sclerodactyl. Okay. The facial changes. You can see the pinched up nose, the pursed lips, and cannot ever dilate. They cannot puts them up, and there's a lip thinning and retraction. Here you can see the thin lips or pursed lips. Pursed lips could be very here this is much better with thin lips, and there is immobile faces. As you can see here, the creases are lost and the thin lips and immobile faces. And the last is the atrophic phase, where you can see the thick dermis reverts to normal or even becomes thinner. That is due to atrophy. And the skin involvement leads to ulceration, loss of soft tissue or fingertip, pigmentation, calcific deposits, and capillary changes. And this is due to atrophy of the dermal appendages, loss of retipex, and compact bundles of collagen. Here you can see the digital pitting scars here, and the calcinosis, deposition of calcium, and the telangiectasias as we were seeing previously, the musculoskeletal involvement. So the telang, here you can see the calcinosis involvement, the Raynaud's we have seen, and the telangiectasias. And the musculoskeletal system involvement. In this musculoskeletal involvement, you can be seeing generalized arthralgia and morning stiffness, and there will be erosive arthropathy. And has been demonstrated to occur in some series as many as 29% of the patients. And inexorable loss of the hand function is the rule as skin thickening versus and the underlying joints become tethered and restricted motion. So because of the fibrosis and thickening of the skin, there will be restricted movements of the hands and the joints with the restricted motion. And there will be muscle weakness in both proximal and distal with both systemic secondary sclerosis due to disuse atrophy. As there is very restricted motion of the joints, the patient tends to use the limbs very less, that leads to disuse atrophy. When you don't use your limbs frequently, then you will be seeing disuse atrophy. And there is subcutaneous calcinosis that occurs in the 40% of the patient with long-standing limited scleroderma, and it's very less in diffuse. Here you can see the presence of calcinosis. So there will be disuse atrophy because of the restricted movements in the joints and the fibrosis of the skin. And this is the calcinosis, and this is the acrolysis. Here you can see the fingertips. And next, the intestinal involvement. The esophageal involvement leads to hypomotility and retrosternal pain that is due to the decreased hypomotility. There will be reflex esophagitis and there will be stricture. And in stomach, you will be seeing the delayed emptying, and the small intestine, the pseudo obstruction or the paralytic ileus and the malabsorption. And in the large intestine, you will be seeing chronic constipation due to the restricted movements and the fecal impaction and diverticulum. So, disordered peristalsis of the lower two-thirds of the esophagus presents as dysphagia, and the impaired function of lower esophageal sphincter. And this leads to chronic esophageal reflux, include erosive esophagitis with bleeding, Barrett's esophagus, and lower esophageal stricture. Whereas involvement of the stomach occurs in systemic sclerosis and present clinically as ease of satiety and on occasion either functional gastric outlet obstruction or acute gastric dilatation. In the small bowel involvement, intermittent bloating with abdominal cramps, intermittent or chronic diarrhea, and presentation suggestive intestinal obstruction. Whenever there is a small bowel involvement, mostly the patient presents as if they is having an intestinal obstruction, and there could be malabsorption, and the bacterial overgrowth in the areas of intestinal stasis occurs frequently. Here you can see due to the obstruction, the fully dilated bowel loops, and there is air in the enlarged bowel. These are the dilated bowel loops due to the obstruction. And these are the diverticular formation of the obstructions. The colonic involvement is present in majority of the patient with systemic sclerosis and is a prominent cause of the symptoms, and it leads to constipation, obstipation, and pseudo obstruction, and may occur and are related to abnormal colonic motility. Next, the involvement, pulmonary involvement, lungs. Mostly two-thirds of the patients are affected, leading to the cause of mortality and morbidity in later stages of systemic sclerosis. So here you can see the mortality and morbidity is more due to the involvement of pulmonary involvement, and it is more in the later stages of systemic sclerosis. The pathology, it's due to the interstitial fibrosis and intimal thickening of the pulmonary arterioles. What happens? This leads to pulmonary hypertension and secondary leading to heart failure. So the pulmonary manifestations, the progressive dyspnea on exertion, limited effect of tolerance, and non-productive cough. You can see the infiltrates and the haziness on the both sides of the lung. And here on CT, you can see scarring and inflammation of the lung, that is interstitial lung disease, seen in both diffuse and limited scleroderma. And the lungs have no scar, but the larger blood vessels are dilated. This is a typical pulmonary arterial hypertension which is seen in the limited scleroderma. See here you can see the scarring of the tissues, whereas here you can see the normal lung tissue. Here you can see scarring of the tissues. This leads to interstitial lung disease. Here you can only see the dilatation of the blood vessels. Pulmonary hypertension, individuals with limited systemic sclerosis may also develop interstitial disease, but are also at risk of progressive pulmonary hypertension in the absence of interstitial change, a complication most typical of long-standing disease. You can see healthy pulmonary vessel, whereas this is a pulmonary hypertension, and this again leads to right heart failure and secondary to death. The heart, whenever there is involvement, cardiac involvement, you can see pericarditis, inflammation of the pericardium, heart failure that could be secondary to pulmonary arterial hypertension, or and there could be arrhythmia and myocardial fibrosis. And the renal involvement, there is diffuse scleroderma is associated with rapid progression of skin involvement. You can see the renal involvement. The pathology is intimal hyperplasia of intralobular artery. And this leads to fibrosis, necrosis of the afferent arterioles, and glomerulosclerosis. And normally we can see in the glomerulosclerosis the proteinuria and abnormal sedimentation, azotemia, and microangiopathic hemolytic anemia and renal failure. So the important point is the pathology, it is secondary to intimal hyperplasia of the interlobular artery, the fibrinoid necrosis of the afferent arterioles, and the glomerulosclerosis. And the diagnosis, the major criteria, proximal scleroderma, and minor criteria, sclerodactyly, digital pitting scars or loss of substance from the finger pads, or bibasilar pulmonary fibrosis, and one major or two minor or one more criteria for the diagnosis. So what are the major and the minor criteria? So the major criteria is proximal scleroderma, the skin changes, proximal to metacarpophalangeal joints. The minor criteria is sclerodactyly, digital pitting scars of fingertips or loss of distal finger pad, the loss of distal finger pad, and bibasilar pulmonary fibrosis. So these are the three minor criteria. And for the diagnosis, we need one major or two or more minor criteria for the diagnosis. And this is not quite, yeah. And the prognosis, it's quite variable and difficult to predict. And the 5-year survival rate in diffuse is 70%, whereas in the limited is 90%. And the 10-year survival is 50% in diffuse and limited. So the thing is, the limited people have better prognosis than the diffuse. And the major cause of death is renal involvement, cardiac involvement, and pulmonary involvement. So when there is a systemic involvement, there is more cause of death. So here you can summarize. And before this, the treatment of the scleroderma patient is mostly by steroids and treating the underlying conditions like pulmonary hypertension. You can be adding the drugs required for the pulmonary arterial hypertension, or renal involvement in the scleroderma, or glomerulonephrosis, a calcium channel blockers can be used. So the pulmonary involvement. So depending upon the involvement, we can be using the drugs required. And also the drugs we were discussing in the last class, like mycophenolate mofetil or any newer drugs, can also be used. And here you can summarize, it's an autoimmune connective tissue disorder with male is to female ratio, with females being more affected, and the onset of age is between 30 to 50 years, that is third to fifth decade. And the smoking increases risk. And the CREST syndrome, that is calcinosis, that is calcium deposits usually in fingers, and the Raynaud's phenomenon, esophageal dysmotility causing GERD, and sclerodactyly and telangiectasias. The other signs are hypopigmentation, ulceration, necrosis, and gangrene of the affected tissue, and usually hands and feet. And the organ involvement can affect any organ, most commonly kidneys, GIT, the gastrointestinal tract, the heart, and the lungs. When the kidneys are involved, it's glomerulonephritis leading to renal failure, most leads to azotemia and death. And when there is a gastrointestinal involvement, you can be seeing, as we were discussing previously, this could be obstruction, like intestinal obstruction leads to constipation, vomitings, and due to the obstruction, there could be more production of the microorganisms, the bacteria, and the secondary uh, the bacteria leading to secondary effects. And the heart involvement, you can be seeing pericarditis, and the lungs, pulmonary infiltrates that leads to interstitial lung disease on the long standing, and the pulmonary arterial hypertension. And it is resulting in vascular damage, organ damage due to fibrosis, secondary to vascular pathology, and renal and pulmonary complications are life-threatening. And investigations, you can be seeing anti-centromere antibodies in 40% of the cases associated with milder limited cutaneous scleroderma, whereas anti-scleroderma antibodies. So these are the two important antibodies. These were the antibodies we were discussing when we were discussing about approach to arthritis. The anti-centromere antibodies is present in limited cutaneous scleroderma, whereas anti-scleroderma antibodies is present in 70% of the cases associated with severe diffuse cutaneous scleroderma. It doesn't mean that every case will be having the antibodies positive, but the most of the cases you can be seeing is anti-centromere, anti-scleroderma, whether if it's limited or the diffuse. And treatment, it's very hard to treat, and there is no specific treatment for the disease. The complications should be managed individually, as I was saying. The treating the complication, the underlying problem is important, and the immunosuppressants may be used in severe flare-ups, that is cyclophosphamide. And when there is a renal impairment, you can be using AC inhibitors, or esophageal involvement leading to GERD, then you can be using proton pump inhibitors. And in the pulmonary hypertension, you can be using calcium channel blockers. And in monitoring the heart disorders, then it could be an annual ECG monitoring. And the prognosis, as we were discussing, the limited scleroderma has better prognosis than the diffuse scleroderma. So this is where I want to finish it off. Are there any questions you want to ask or any doubts? Anyone present there? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So any doubts to anyone, or no? Or shall I start asking questions? It's up to you. Just want to show these pictures again so that you can just remember this. So this is the thickening leading to immobility, and here you can see the fingers being severely curled. So what happens when there is a thickening and severe the curling and this, there is limited range of the motion, and when there is a limited range of motion, the patient tends to use tends not to use the limbs, so this leads to diffuse atrophy. Here you can see the thickening of the skin, the telangiectasias. I'll again just show the pictures once so that you can see this, the skin involvement, the oval skin patches. This is the linear involvement, the linear skin patches with loss of hair. And here you can see with the induration, the fibrosis and band-like structure. Here you can see that the Raynaud's phenomena, this is one thing you should remember, exposure to cold water or emotional stress. So you can see the red color. This is the normal skin, here the white, and this could be see the red, and then the ultimately it develops to this blue color. And here you can see the telangiectasias. And this is the terminal digit resorptions. You can see the terminal digits here. See the digital ulcers. This is mostly due to the decreased blood supply due to vascular ischemia secondary to Raynaud's phenomena, and you will be seeing this digital ulcers, which may be necrosed and see the digital necrosis and later leading to mutilation, auto mutilation of the fingers. So here you can see the sclerodactyly, the tightening of the skin distal to the metacarpophalangeal joints. The metacarpo, yeah, you can see this. The distal to metacarp. This is the metacarpophalangeal joint. This is proximal interphalangeal joint, and this is the distal interphalangeal joint. So here, this is the distal interphalangeal, the proximal interphalangeal joint and distal interphalangeal joint. So distal to this thing, you can be seeing the tightening or the thickened skin that causes the flexion contraction of the fingers. So you can see the fingers being flexion and the contractures. In this one, you can be seeing here the perioral furrowing on the face. This thing, perioral furrowing on the face, and here you can be seeing the flexion contraction in these two slides. So this is very characteristic and of the systemic sclerosis. This is called acrosclerosis, flexion contracture secondary to skin tightening. And the facial changes, here you can see the thin lips, loss of facial expressions, and the digital pitting scars, and the calcinosis. And this is the calcinosis and the acrolysis of the bone. So I would just like to show this one slide again, last. So the CREST syndrome, this is the one important, and the male is to female ratio with most involvement being between the 30 to 50 years. And the involvement of the systemic involvement, mostly involvement of renal or pulmonary or the cardiac will lead to mortality and morbidity. And there will be presence of anti-centromere antibodies and anti-scleroderma antibodies in limited and diffuse respectively. And there is no specific treatment. Immunosuppressants can be used in flare-ups, and the renal involvement could be seen. And then you can be using AC inhibitors, that is angiotensin convertase enzyme inhibitors, and the esophageal proton pump inhibitors. And pulmonary hypertension, you can be using calcium channel blockers or annual spirometry monitoring of the heart. And the prognosis is it's better in limited, whereas it is compared to the diffuse. So I think this should be enough. And thank you.